Okay, this is the review, chapter 3 review. And I already made a video for some of these, but we're going to now start at 34 and go to 42 for solving the quadratic. Okay, don't forget the methods that we have. You can get x by itself. You can factor, complete the square, quadratic formula. And we're going to try to figure out what's best on all these. So on 34, what's a little bit different is that 0 is not on one side, and that is the first thing you have to do. You have to get 0 on one side first. And we'll do that by adding 8x. So I'll get 4x squared plus 8x plus 5 equals 0. Now, if you were good at completing the square, this would be a good one to do completing the square on. But some of you see the 4 in front, you're like, not even going to mess with it. And that's perfect. So I would say the most kids will do quadratic formula here, and that's what I'll do first. And then I'm going to show you how it would have been a little bit easier with completing the square. So quadratic formula means A is 4, B is 8, and C is 5. And now we'll plug it in. Negative B plus or minus the square root, B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Okay, so negative B is negative 8. Plus or minus the square root. Notice I didn't even try to factor. It might factor. I didn't even try. Okay. Negative B plus or minus square root. B squared, always positive, 64. Minus 4. A times C is 20. All over 2A, which 2 times 4 is 8. So I get negative 8 plus or minus. I'll type this in my calculator. 64 minus 80. Yeah, I get negative 16. What does that mean? That means I'm going to get an imaginary number here. And that's okay. So I get negative 8 plus or minus square root of negative 16 means there's an I. Square root of 16 means 4. So that's a 4I over 8. And this is where the simplifying comes in. When we simplify, you have to love math. You have to simplify this piece and this piece. So negative 8 over 8 is negative 1. Plus or minus 4I over 8 is 4 over 8, which is 1/2 I. Okay? So let's pretend that you tried to complete the square. What would that look like? Okay, well, first of all, you'd be very adventurous, so I applaud you. And you would say, okay, I have 4 x squared boxes. So each box will get 2 because I have 8 x's for all 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And each side gets 1. So each side is going to get 1. So I have 4 boxes of size x plus 1 square. And that means there's a 1 here, 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 and here. Which means there's 4. But I actually have 5. So I need to add 1 more to get to the 5. And then that equals 0. And now I can solve this. I would subtract 1 from both sides. I get 4. X plus 1 squared equals negative 1. I can't square root both sides yet. I mean, you could, but you don't. Usually isolate the radical, the square first. So divide both sides by 4. And I get x plus 1 squared is negative 1/4. Now square root both sides. X plus 1 is plus or minus. You square root the top, you square root the bottom. Square root the top and you just get I. Square root the bottom and you get 2. And then subtract 1. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus I over 2, which is the exact same thing as 1/2 I. It's the exact same thing. Okay, I think quadratic formula is what most of you would have liked on that one. Looking at 36, 36 is not ready to go. Okay, notice that 0 is not on one side. And on this one, some of you might be surprised, but when I move things, I'm going to move everything to the right because I want to keep my n squareds positive. So I'm going to minus n squared. I'm going to add 8n. And I'm going to subtract 18. So I'm moving everything to the right. And I get 0 equals 2n squared, minus n minus 18. Will it factor? I can already kind of say no. I'm thinking about AC in my head. That would be 36. And there's no way that there's two numbers that are only one away if I use 36. So it doesn't factor. I would not complete the square here because you're going to have decimals. So I would definitely do quadratic formula. A is 2. B is -1. C is -18. Okay. X equals -b, which will be +1, plus or minus the square root. Ooh, that's so bad. B squared is 1, always positive, minus 4. A times C is -36, all over 2A, which is 4. That gives me 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus 4 times -36 is going to be a positive 145 all over 4. Does that break down? 145 divided by 5 is 29. And 29 is prime. 5 does not even come out. So that's your final answer. Now, you could leave it like that, or you can love math, which is probably what most of you should do. So that's 1/4 plus or minus the square root of 145 over 4. It's just kind of a gross one. Okay, what we got next? 38. 38, again, I don't have 0 on one side. I have lots of negatives. So you actually have two choices here. I would have just moved everything to the right, but you could have multiplied everything by -1 and then moved over to the left. So that's up to you. Let's go ahead and just move everything to the right. 5b squared, 5b plus 4. Okay, so 0 equals, that'll be 2b squared plus 5b plus 4. Do I think it factors? I don't. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 won't break down to give me 5. Don't want to complete the square. 5 is odd. Don't want to mess with it. So quadratic formula it is. A is 2, B is 5, and C is 4. Don't forget, x equals -b plus or minus square root. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So -b is -5 plus or minus the square root. B squared, always positive, 25 minus 4. A times C is 8. It's going to be negative again. All over 2a, which is 4. Clean up a little bit. -5 plus or minus the square root. Type it in. 25 minus 4 times 8, which is 25 minus 32, which is -7. All over 4. What do I do with the negative? I'm going to pull it out. So it's going to be -5 plus or minus. Put the square root of 7 first and then the I after. All over 4. And then we wrap this one up like we've been doing all the rest. You just love math at the end. Draw your little heartsy. -5 over 4 plus or minus the square root of 7 gets over 4. And then don't forget your I. And it's not wrong if you put the I right by the 7. Just can't be underneath the square root. Okay, 40 and 42, they look like good candidates for completing the square, but you can do quadratic formula or factor if that allows it. On 40, I'm going to add 4 to both sides first. B squared minus 6b, negative 27 plus 4 is negative 23 equals 0. I'm not going to factor. 23 is prime. It does not give me negative 6. I'm going to show you this problem 2 ways. First, I'm going to complete the square, which is easiest because this is even. I'm going to show you why it's a little smoother here. What square is this closest to? Well, if I have a b squared and 6 b's, each side will get 3. So it's closest to a b minus 3 square, which we'll put a 9 in the corner because 3 times 3 is 9. So I'm going to take away the 9 and take away the 23. So I'm taking away 32 here, and that equals 0. Okay, so I'm going to solve for b. Get b all by itself. You add 32, and I get b minus 3 squared is 32. You square root both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus, and you get b minus 3 is plus or minus the square root of 32. But the square root of 32 does simplify. There is a perfect square that's in it. 16 times 2 is 32. So that's b minus 3 is plus or minus. The square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 2 is underneath. And now you just add 3 to finish it up. So b equals 3 plus or minus 4 square root of 2. Okay, so let's say I don't like completing the square. I want to do quadratic formula, Miss Bruno. Sure. No one's stopping you. So quit saying I'm stopping you. No one's stopping you. Okay, A is 1, B is negative 6, and C is negative 23. So watch what happens. Negative B is 6 plus or minus square root. B squared is 36 minus 4. A times C is negative 23 all over 2A, which is 2. When you do quadratic formula, if you could have completed the square, you'll get a bigger number underneath the square root. That's the only difference. It'll be bigger under the square root. So 36 minus 4 times negative 23, that's 128 over 2. So when you get bigger numbers, sometimes it's harder to find what goes into it. And 64 goes into that. So that's 6 plus or minus 64 times 2 over 2, which is 6 plus or minus 8 root 2 over 2. And now when I love math, it will simplify. Because look, 6 over 2, that's 3, plus or minus the 8 over the 2, that gives you the 4 square root of 2. So when you do quadratic formula, it gets a little bit messier to simplify. But when you complete the square, it's kind of messy to complete the square. So you kind of got to pick what mess you want. Okay, last one here. I'm 42. I have n squared plus 8n minus 67 equals 3. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. N squared plus 8n minus 70 equals 0. 70 can do 10 and 7. That would be 3, though. I don't think I can get to 8. What's 70 divided by 12? Yeah, that doesn't look good. I don't think it works. Okay? If you want to complete the square, I would, because 8 is even. So the closest square it is to is an n plus 4 squared, which would put a 16 in the corner. Have to get rid of the 16 and 70. So I'd have to get rid of 86. And I can solve that by adding 86, n plus 4 squared equals 86. Square root both sides and not forget my plus or minus. M plus 4 is plus or minus the square root of 86. But 86 simplifies. Maybe. No, I don't think it does it? 2 times 43. But 43 is prime. I think it's just 86. Yeah, that's nice. And then you just get n all by itself. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 86. Okay, I'm curious what quadratic formula would leave me with underneath the radical. I would get A is 1, B is 8, and C is negative 70, because I would start it right here at this step. Negative B is negative 8, plus or minus square root. B squared is 64, minus 4 times 70, all over 2A, which is 2. Negative 8 plus or minus, it'll be 64 minus 4 times 70. It looks like I messed up somewhere. Dogs. Negative B is negative 8. B squared minus 4. Oh, 8 times C is negative 70. You see it? There it is, negative 70. So 64 minus 4 times negative 70. That's better. 344 over 2. So then you would have to find what goes into 344. So if you take 344 and you divide it by 4, that's it. It's 4. So it's negative 8 plus or minus. This will be 4 times 86 over 2, which is negative 8 plus or minus 2 square root of 86 over 2. And then you would have to love math. Negative 8 over 2 is negative 4. Plus or minus those 2's cancel, square root of 86. Okay, so that's solving. If you want to look at these next ones, you can. You might want to save them to closer to the test if you need to. So that's the first part of the video.